Hey everyone, my name is Abhishek and in today's video we are going to create this. So this rock texture is created using 100% After Effects and it is created in a procedural way, which means you can easily change text or use any logo without doing much. Also 88% of you are not subscribed to my channel, so if you are new here then please consider subscribing and make sure to press that bell icon so that you never miss another amazing video like this. So without wasting any further ado, let's jump into After Effects and get started. Alright, so right now I'm in After Effects and for this tutorial we are going to use this texture. So I'll put a link in the description from where you can download this, and after that you can import it in After Effects and then you are ready to go. So first we are going to create a new composition. So let's go to composition, new comp, and let's call this main. Width and height will be 1920 by 1080, frame rate 30 fps, and duration you can go with whatever you want. Just click on OK. So now we have our comp, and the next thing that we are going to do is we are going to add our text. So you can select the text tool and you can click wherever you want, then just type whatever text you want. I'm going to type rock. And it's completely up to you, you can pick whatever font you want. Just make sure that it's a little bit wider font so that our effect will look nice onto it. After that, let's align the text into the center of this composition. And if you're not able to see this align panel, then you can go to Windows and from here you can enable it. Now let's select the layer and we can hold down the Control key and double click on this pan anchor tool so that your anchor point will move into the center of this text. Now we can probably select this and let's scale this up, something like this. And after that we can select the layer, right click, and let's pre-compose it. Let's call this placeholder and let's click on OK. Now I'm going to add the texture into our texture composition. So for that let's create a new texture comp. Let's drag our texture into this. We can probably scale this because it's really large, something like this. After that, let's go back to our main composition. So first we don't want our text to be this smooth, so we are going to add a little bit of distortion to this. So for that we are going to use an effect called Turbulent Displace. So you can just search for Turbulent Displace and let's drag it onto this placeholder layer. And right away you can see it is distorting our text. And we are going to change these parameters. So first let's change the amount and you can just simply lower it down to something like 45 or 40. Size we can lower it down to something like 4, and complexity let's increase it to something like 3. So right away you can see we have these rough edges instead of these smooth ones, and we're pretty much done with this. Now let me just quickly import our texture. So I'm going to import this into the timeline and I'm going to place it below our placeholder so that we can use the track matte option. And if you're not able to see the track matte option, then you can simply click on this icon and it will make these options appear. After that we can select the track matte option and let's set this to alpha matte so that our texture is visible only where we have this layer, just like this. Now I'm going to create another copy of this placeholder. So I'm going to quickly drag it into the comp, and on this one I'm going to create little bit of bigger chunks. So for that I'm going to use a different effect and let's apply roughen edges to this. Just quickly drag it onto this and let's play around with these values. So first the S type, I'm going to change this to cut. Border, let's set this to something like 55 or 60. Edge sharpness, let's change this to 10 because we want the edges to be really sharp. Fractal influence will be set at 1. Scale we can increase it to however you want. Let's set this to something like 120. Complexity, again it's up to you. Let's set this to 3 for now. And right away you can see we have our text and it has these really nice rough edges, so we are going to make use of it. And now let's create a new solid background. So right click, new solid, and I'm going to change its color to white just for the preview purpose. Let's place it at the bottom and I'm going to lock this layer so that we don't accidentally move this. And now I'm going to apply one more effect onto this placeholder, which is the simple choker. So just search for it and let's drag it onto this. And right now I'm not going to change any of these values, but I'll show you what this effect will do later on. So we can probably turn this off. And over here we have our text. We can probably enable the texture layer. So right away you can see we have these cutout areas where we can simply add the bevel depth. So in order to do that, let's select the layer and we can right click and go to layer style, and from here we can enable the bevel and emboss. And let's go under this, and over here we are going to change couple of these settings. So first we are going to change the style from inner to outer because we want the bevel to be outside this black region. And after that let's change the depth to something like 70, and let's change the scale to something like 20. Light angle you can set this to 60 or whatever you want. I want the light to fall from this angle, so I'm going to set this to 60. And over here we have the highlight mode, and first I'm going to change the opacity to 20, and let's change the highlight mode from screen to color dodge. And under the shadow we can change the opacity to something like 70 or 60, whatever you want. Let's go with 70. And from multiply let's change this to color burn, something like this. Now we have to get rid of this black area, so in order to do that we can just simply change the mode from normal to add, something like this. So right away you can see we have these really nice chunks which looks like that our texture has these engravings, and we can play around with these values. So for example you can increase the opacity, something like this, if you want these to be more prominent, but for now let's keep it at 70. And let's see what this simple joker will do. So if I enable this you can see that nothing has happened, but if I increase this value you can see that now our outside indentation is being affected. So this is how you can add more indentation. So for now let's set this to something like 14. So I think this is looking fine. And now we are going to add more details to this. Now I want to add a little bit of darker texture into this region. For that we have to first separate this region from the rest of the text, and it is very easy to do. So let's see how we can do that. So first I'm going to select these two layers and I'm going to change their color so that we can make this little bit more organized. And after that I am going to select the placeholder. Let's press Ctrl D to duplicate it. And on this one I'm going to delete the simple choker. And instead I'm going to import our texture. I'm going to place it below the placeholder, and after that we are going to set the track matte to alpha inverted. And if I disable these layers, so right away you can see we have these cutouts, something like this. Now I'm going to select the top two layers and I'm going to right click and let's pre-compose this, and I'm going to call this chunks. Just click on OK. Now let me just quickly enable the text layer and the background. So now we are going to use this placeholder and we are going to extract only the outer edges. So in order to do that, let's select this, press Ctrl D to duplicate it, and I'm going to place it on top of this chunks. And let's select the chunk layer and I'm going to change this to alpha matte. So if I disable all the other layers like this, you can see that we have only the outer edges, just like this. So we can play around with these and we can make them darker. So let me just quickly enable all the layers, just like this. And first I'm going to select the chunk and let's change this blending mode to linear burn. So right away you can see we have these really nice dark areas. And again we can select the chunk layer and we can apply curves to this, and let's drag it onto this, and we can make this little bit darker, something like this. We can also do one more thing. We can go inside the chunk layer and we can use this texture and let's move it at different place, something like this, so that we have a little bit of variation inside this texture. You can also use any other texture if you want instead of this one, so that that texture will be visible in these chunks, something like this. So now we are pretty much done with this, and let's quickly add some 3D depth to this. For that we are going to again make use of the placeholder text. So first let me just quickly select the placeholder and I'm going to press Ctrl D to duplicate it. Now let me just quickly enable this and let's place it below our texture, something like this. And I'm going to quickly solo this layer and let's enable the transparency so that we can see what we are doing here. And on this one I'm going to first apply an effect called CC radial blur. Let's drag it onto this, and after that I'm going to change the type to fading zoom, and we can set the amount to something like -15 or -20, whatever you want. And now we can use the curves effect, and we can take the alpha out, and we can make this really sharp. So let me just quickly search for curves, and let's drag it onto this. I'm going to change the channel to alpha, and we are going to just simply click in the middle of this and just drag this to the very top edge, something like this. So right away you can see we have this really thick text, and if I change the amount, you can see we can increase or decrease the depth, something like this. But for now let's keep it at 15, and if I undo the solo option, you can see that we have added this really nice depth to this. Again, you can increase the depth by simply using this slider, but for now let's keep it at 15, or let's maybe go to -18. I think this is looking good. Now we don't want this to be black in color. We can add a little bit of texture to this. But first let me just quickly select this, and let's call this 3D depth. And again I'm going to select my texture, and let's drag it below this layer. And after that I'm going to change the track matte to alpha matte, so that our texture is visible wherever we have this 3D depth layer. And again I'm going to select these two layers, and let's change their colors to something like blue, just like this. Now let's quickly add a little bit of lighting to this texture layer. So again we can select this, right click, and let's go under the layer style, and let's enable bevel and emboss. And after that we are going to change a couple of these options over here. First I'm going to change the size from 5 to 70, and then we are going to play around with the angle. So it's completely up to you, you can play around with the angle value, but for now let's keep it at 120. I'm going to change the highlight opacity to 20, and let's change the mode from screen to color dodge, and change the shadow opacity to something like 60, and let's change this to color burn, just like that. So now you can see we have added a little bit of this texture over here. We can do one more thing. We can select the texture layer, and we can probably scale it or just move it around so that we have a little bit of variation on this texture, just like this. Now you can also select this and apply curves onto this layer if you want to make this texture a little bit darker, just like this. Now let's quickly add a background. So we are going to again use the texture layer, and let's drag it below this layer. We are going to apply curves to this, and let's make this a little bit brighter. Now in order to enhance this more, we can add some shadow to this. So for that we are going to again use the placeholder text. So just simply select this, and let's drag it over here. I'm going to quickly select this, and let's call this shadow. Let's select this texture, and let's call this PG for background. And on this shadow we are going to apply CC radial blur, and let's change this to fading zoom, and let's increase the amount, and we can change the center, and let's click and let's place the center somewhere around here, just like this. Let's increase the amount to something like this, and we are probably going to select the layer, press T for opacity, and let's lower it down, just like this. Again we are going to select the shadow layer, then press Ctrl D to duplicate it. Now on this one we are going to decrease the amount so that we have a shadow which is like really near to this, something like this. Again we can play around with the slider, and on this one we can increase the opacity so that we have a little bit of darker shadow. So right away you can see we have this really nice rocky textured look. And if you want to play around with these bevels, then you can just simply select the placeholder layer, and over here we can play around with the simple choker so that it will give these really nice chunks. And you can also play around with the borders however you want, it's completely up to you. You can make them a little bit darker by simply selecting this, and we can go inside the bevel and emboss, and let's increase the shadow opacity, something like this. So this is completely experimental and you can play around with these values. And there is one more thing that we can do. We can probably select the shadow layer, press Ctrl D to duplicate it. And on this one, I'm going to apply a fill effect. And let's drag it over here. And let's change its color to white. And I'm going to change its center to somewhere around here, so that we have these really nice white outline. And we can probably play around with the amount and opacity, something like this, so that it will add a little bit of this nice glow at the edges, just like this. So this is how you can create this rocky texture look. Now just like in the preview, if you want to animate this texture, then you can select the placeholder comp and you can animate this border effect. So you can increase its value to 0, and then after that you can animate it. And you can also animate the value of this choker, so you can animate it from 0, and let's set this to 0 as well. And after that you can add keyframes to these two, and then you can simply increase its value, something like this, and at the same time increase the choker value as well. And you can also animate the shadow, so you can add a keyframe for the center and you can move the center so that its shadow will move according to it. And there is one more thing. If you want to add a little bit of more texture to this, then you can do one more thing. You can create a new composition, and let's call this texture overlay. Just click on OK. After that, I'm going to quickly import my texture into this, and let me just quickly create a adjustment layer. On this adjustment layer, I'm going to apply CC threshold. Let's drag it onto this, and right away you can see that it will take away most of the effect and it will give you these really nice imperfections, which you can increase or decrease by using the threshold amount. So let's set this to something like this, and after that you can zoom in, and let's move to 6 frames, and then you can select your texture, press Ctrl Shift D, then again you can select the texture and you can just simply scale it, and let's play around and place it somewhere around here. And in the beginning, let's scale it and let's place it somewhere around here, just like this. And let's again move 6 frames. Then we can probably rotate this and let's place it somewhere around here. Just scale this up, something like this. Again, just move 6 frames and then just simply randomly place this texture. After that, you can just simply press N and it will move the timeline endpoint, and then you can right click and just click trim comp to work area, just like this. So now if I play back, here you can see we have created this quick texture. Now let's go back to the main comp, and I'm going to drag this texture overlay on top of this, and I'm going to change the mode to multiply so that we are able to see the texture. And if I play back, here you can see we have the texture which is playing back, but if we want this to keep on playing, we can just simply right click, go to time, enable time remapping, and after that you can hold down the Alt key or Option key on Mac, then click on the stopwatch, and after that just simply type this small expression loop out, just like this, and you can increase the duration. And let's move the layer a little bit ahead, and now if I play back, here you can see we have this really nice texture. And if it's too much, then you can select the layer, press T, and let's lower down its opacity, something like this. So now if I play back, here you can see we have added this really nice grungy texture on top of this. And since it's all procedural, so if you want to change the text, all you have to do is just go inside the placeholder comp and then just simply type whatever you want. And if I come back, here you can see that it has changed our text. And again, if you want, you can play around with these values depending upon your text, however you want, just like this. And there you go. So this is how you can create some really nice rock textured look. Also, if you want, you can drag your logo into this comp as well. So if I drag this PS logo, and we can probably apply fill to this because we want this to be black. Let's change the color to black. and I don't want this R, so I can just simply mask this out and let's set this to invert. So now we have this logo, and if I go back, here you can see we have added our logo and it already has all the effects applied. So you might have to change the shadow angle or the center depending upon what object you have, something like this. So this is how you can easily create this rock textured look. The project file for this tutorial are available on Patreon, so if you are supporting me over there, then you can download it from there. And if you are not, then you might consider it, because you will get access to the tutorial project files and other templates which are available exclusively on Patreon. So with that being said, my name is Abhishek and I'll see you in the next one.